This is a special podcast presentation from 700WLW.com. This is Darryl Parks On Demand.
Wait a minute. They can't kick the can down the street any farther? What's the deal? Is that an apropos song or what for Detroit? Nowhere to run to and nowhere to hide. Wow. Bankruptcy. Chapter 9. Liquidation. And I have breaking news this morning. I had no idea. Look, this is way before my time and way before your time as well. But I guess in the 1940s, there was Howdy Doody. Who knew Detroit owns the puppet? Paid big bucks for it, and they are saying Howdy Doody is not for sale. So we have breaking news about, what? More breaking news. A suburb of Detroit says now they want to erect a 12-foot wall to keep out Detroiters. Okay, good. And if you think this can't happen to a Columbus, a Cleveland, a Toledo, a Cincinnati, Detroit, you are sorely, sorely mistaken. Because bankruptcy, Chapter 9 of a city, although there have been dozens of cities since 2010, believe it or not, that have filed for Chapter 9, this one is the big kahuna. This is the big city. And if you look at it by some metrics, Cincinnati's in worse shape. Greed, unions, have caused what was once America's, this is recent. You know, people talk about a decline in population happening in Detroit since 1950. The reality is it's since 1970. A city of almost 2 million people. In the mid-1960s, the city of Detroit was America's richest city. Not that long ago. The highest income per capita, Detroit. Today it is America's poorest city. 83% of the population is African American. Few left in the city of Detroit pay any taxes. The liabilities for retirees and pensions far outweigh the number of employees that work for the city of Detroit, and the city of Detroit, by the way, is the biggest employer in the city of Detroit. That's not good. 40%. Picture this if you live in, wherever you live. Suburbs of anywhere in the tri-state. Picture this. You go out at night and most of the street lights don't light up. Somebody tries to break into your house and wants to shoot you in the back of the head. And it takes 58 minutes on average for the police to show up and save you from being shot in the back of the head. And by the way, national average is 11 minutes. That is the shape of Detroit today. I started off by saying greed of unions and the greed of politicians. And what happened in that city up north, the can no longer be kicked down the street. But here in Cincinnati, they continue to kick the can down the street. As recent as 2008, the city of Detroit had a balanced budget. The city of Cincinnati has operated in a deficit, you ready for this? Since 2000. It's only been since 2008 that Detroit has. 5 years ago. For Cincinnati, 13 years. Detroit is broke to the tune of $20 billion. That's what they think is the number. $9.2 billion is unfunded liabilities to 2 pension plans. Cincinnati's pension plans are unfunded to the tune of $1 billion. Detroit has 100,000 creditors. But here's what's not talked about when we get into the budget debate here in Cincinnati, trying to sell off assets. A few years ago, somebody had the bright idea to sell off the water company. The only reason that Cincinnati is viable as the heart of this community is its water system, right? So no matter where you live, you buy Cincinnati water. But I digress. Now the city of Cincinnati wants to sell off its parking, which will, if you do the math out 30 years, will give them less money in the tune of almost $30 million than if they simply kept the parking meters. But here's what's not talked about. In every one of these cases, whether it's Toledo, whether it's Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Detroit, these cities were built before there were suburbs. These cities were built for populations much greater than they have today. At its high point, Detroit had just over 1.8 million people, so almost 2 million people. Today it has 670,000 people. At its high point, the city of Cincinnati had just shy of 600,000 people. Today, the city of Cincinnati has 290,000 people. Yet in all these cases, the size of government has not decreased. Why would that be? Well, that would be for a couple of different reasons. Unions won't allow that to happen. A decrease in city government size. And then the other side of it is politicians want to keep telling you what they're going to do for you, but they won't make the decisions that they're elected to make, which is simply be fiscally responsible and plan for the future. If you think the problems of Detroit can't come to other cities, you're sorely mistaken, because what's going to happen here is, because of its size and look. I mean, there are people right away saying, hey, in many states, this is not allowed, this is illegal. There are local and state laws, constitutions that prevent this from happening. Chapter 9, I mean. Don't believe it. Because this will set the precedent. I know a judge ruled late yesterday that Detroit cannot file for Chapter 9. It's against the Constitution of the state of Michigan. That's a political decision. That's not true. Detroit sets the precedent. And if Detroit goes through all of this, it affects you, because if you, let's say you own bonds, municipal bonds, you own a bond fund, chances are they may own bonds issued by the city of Detroit. As a matter of fact, this past week, and I couldn't find this in the news. This past week, the bond rating for the city of Cincinnati was downgraded. Did you know that? It was. Because of the mismanagement, the fiscal mismanagement happening in City Hall in downtown Cincinnati. Detroit will be the case study, because all the coward politicians, all the people that say they're going to do what's right by you when they run for election, all those politicians, when they see what Detroit goes through, they're going to line up too. And they're going to pass the buck because they don't want to be blamed for what they have done to city after city, once great cities in America. It's 2013. As recent as 1965, Detroit was the richest city in America. Not that long ago. 17 after 9, 513-749-7000, 1-800-THE-BIG-1, pound 700 on AT&T. Looks like a pretty nice weekend, huh? Weather-wise, warm and maybe some showers today. We'll check the Fox 19 forecast in 4 minutes on 700 WLW. Fox 19 storm tracker forecast on this beautiful morning in the tri-state. Later on today, cloudy skies, maybe a storm developing in the afternoon. It's going to be a muggy day. Wow, when I left the house this morning, I was like, whoa. You can see it hanging in the air. High today at 88. For tonight, some storms early on and then clearing with a low of 68. For tomorrow, less humid, clearing skies 85. And as we head back to work on Monday with Jim Scott, Monday's high is going to be about 80. Not bad. 77 clear skies across the tri-state. 700 WLW. Yep, it's going to happen in cities all across America. Bank on it if Detroit goes through Chapter 9. Keep your eye on this because this affects you. Many of you may have investments in bonds. If you have a bond fund, you may have a bond from the city of Detroit. You may want to check your portfolio. This will end up affecting you one way or another. This past week, the city of Cincinnati had their bond rating decreased. Why? Because the city of Cincinnati is run like Detroit. That's why. 2008, Detroit had a balanced budget. Cincinnati has not had a balanced budget since the year 2000. Unbelievable. They continue to kick the can down the street. They continue to ignore their liabilities, such as pensions. The city of Cincinnati has a pension plan unfunded. And how this happens in a city the size of Cincinnati is beyond me. But unfunded to the tune of over $1 billion with a B, $1 billion. Detroit, one of the richest cities in America as recent as 1965. Healthcare subsidies account for $561 per year from every resident of Detroit. The average monthly income of a person in Detroit is about $1,200 before taxes. The unemployment rate in the city of Detroit, you ready for this? 30%. Good God. Unbelievable. And the greed continues. So you ask yourself the question, in a city like Cincinnati, here, one of the things I'm a big proponent on is merging city government with county government. There's no reason to have two police forces. There's no reason to have all these duplication of services on all these different levels of government. That's why it's so expensive to live in a county like Hamilton County. A few decades ago, the city of Indianapolis figured out that, look, if we merge with Marion County, Indiana, great things could happen. Now, back in the early 80s, I lived in outside of Indianapolis. I lived in Kokomo. I also worked in Indianapolis. And I remember in the 80s going to Indianapolis, and your first impression was, good God, what the hell happened here? I mean, a depressing, forgotten city. I mean, you go downtown, around the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, the building's decrepit. You had the train station that was abandoned. This is before the dome was built, the RCA dome. And in a few short years, a plan was put together. Governments were merged. That dome was built, that original dome. The Colts moved from Baltimore. They had the Pan American Games in Indianapolis. It became the so-called amateur sports capital of the world. That was their mission, their plan. And within a few decades, the city of Indianapolis is this vibrant city. And not only at its core, Not only downtown where the Dome is and the convention center is, and all those hotels and the shopping. Across all of Marion County. The blueprint for what needs to happen in a city and a county in which we live, in which I live, Hamilton County, is 100 miles to the west, down Interstate 74. But because of greed, because of ego, because of outside influences such as unions, it's prevented. Why don't people speak up? People that are elected to office, people that are elected to spend responsibly the tax dollars we send to them. Why don't they say, hey, look, this is what has to happen? People that have great fiscal minds and great fiscal heads, people like Christopher Smitherman. That's what he does. He's a money manager in his other job. Why? What's preventing it, right? Are you ready for this? 100,000 creditors for the city of Detroit. And I'm just going to read a few of these. Here are the unions that are creditors to the city of Detroit. The American Federation of State, City, and Municipal Employees. Amalgamated Transit Union, Division 26. Assistant Supervisor of Street Maintenance and Construction Association. Association of City Detroit Supervisors. The Association of Detroit Engineers. The Association of Municipal Engineers. The Association of Municipal Inspectors. The Association of Professional Construction Inspectors. The Association of Professional and Technical Employees. The Building and Construction Trades Council. Detroit Firefighters Association. Detroit Income Tax Investigators Association. Detroit License Investigators Association. Detroit, get this, Detroit Police Command Officers Association. Detroit Police Lieutenant and Sergeants Association. Detroit Police Officers Association. Department of Transportation Foremen's Association of America. The EMS Officers Association, and it goes on and on and on. The Sanitary Chemists and Technicians Association. The Senior Water Systems Chemists Association. And here's the scary thing. I also have a list of all the Teamsters unions. And I haven't even gotten close to them. Detroit Police Command Officers Association. Why would management need a union? $100,000 creditors. I wonder how many creditors the city of Cincinnati has, and I wonder how many creditors are unions in the city of Cincinnati. Unbelievable. 28 after 9. Jack has the news in a minute. 700 700WLW.com. Go to my blog. It's a service of Alarm Force. That list of unions that are creditors to the city of Detroit, I have that list on my blog. Check it out. Way too many to read here on the air. 25 in front of 10. 513-749-7000. The city of Cincinnati, by some metrics, may be in worse shape than the city of Detroit. Hard to believe that the city of Detroit had a balanced budget as recently as 2008. Here in Cincinnati, they've been kicking the can down the street since 2000. They haven't had a freaking balanced budget in the city of Cincinnati this century. Unreal. Why you should be upset, people will say, well, Darryl, that's why I moved out of the city of Cincinnati a long time ago and I moved to Mason or Anderson or wherever, right? That's not the point. Many of you work in the city of Cincinnati, so you are paying taxes. You're paying a payroll tax in the city of Cincinnati. You have a vested interest that your money is spent correctly. And the people that are elected refuse to do it. You know, we tend to focus on a couple of things, you know, that the symbol of the streetcar being the ultimate in wasted money. But it's lies that people just go along with. They're part of the pack. They're a part of the group, and it must be okay. You know, the city manager says so. And people just acquiesce and give in. I may not live in the city of Cincinnati. You may live outside of the city of Cincinnati. But the truth is, we all have a vested interest in the health of the city that is the heart of the tri-state area. Whether you live in northern Kentucky or southeastern Indiana, or you live here in Hamilton County, Warren, or Butler County. This is stealing that's going on. You know, for instance, selling off the parking in Cincinnati, which I'm going to get into in the 10 o'clock hour here. I'm going to put it all together here, but this is, you might be asking, you've never asked yourself the question, where's the $92 million coming from that is upfront money? Well, they're going to sell bonds. The Port Authority of Cincinnati, which is all of this stuff with the parking is against their charter, okay? They're going to sell bonds. And who ends up paying back the bonds? You! Who do you think? So somebody's going to go out there and buy a portion of the bond, right? And then at the end of the term, they get all their money back, and each month you're paid interest on the bonds you purchased. And who pays that? Taxpayers. Yeah, but they don't talk about that. They don't want to admit to that. They don't want you to know that in selling the parking in Cincinnati and selling it off an asset. I was joking about Howdy Doody, the puppet. Who knew the city of Detroit owned Howdy Doody? Who knew, right? But hey, that's before my time and before your time. But I guess the puppet's worth about $300,000. Somebody's going to want to buy it, right? But the city of Cincinnati paying off or selling off its assets. All right. So over this 30-year lease of selling off the parking, $197 million will be realized back to the city of Cincinnati. $92 million up front. That's if the Port Authority doesn't get their taste, if you know what I'm talking about there. $197 million. All right. Over that same 30-year period, the city would have made a profit of $219 million if they continued to manage it themselves. So they're leaving $22 million over 30 years on the table. How is that fiscally responsible? But no one wants to talk about that. You have the people running for mayor like Roxanne Qualls, who is accused of lying. The city manager is accused of lying in memos, and ipso facto, the truth comes out right after the deal is quickly approved and signed. But they're leaving. Bottom line, they're leaving. If you're a taxpayer, that ought to urinate you off. Well, they're leaving $22 million on the table. But they don't talk about that because it's all about kicking the can down the street, and they figure, hey, in 30 years, they're going to be gone. They're going to be out of office or dead, right? So hard to convict a dead politician. 20 in front of 10 on the big one. Looking for caller number 7, 513-749-3700. Caller 7. The Frisch's big boy, big play of the game. Reds winners starting the second half of the season on the right foot. Good luck from Frisch's and the home of the Cincinnati Reds. Goodyear, Arizona, and spring training 2014. All from Frisch's and the home of the Cincinnati Reds. Final score last night, 5-3. Reds beating the Pirates, and the same two this afternoon. 4:05 for the first pitch. Matt Latos pitching for the Cincinnati Reds. Our coverage at 3:06 this afternoon. The Reds are 3 games back of the Pirates and 5 games back of St. Louis in the National League Central as we head into the second half of the Major League Baseball season. All right, 15 in front of 10. I'm Darryl Parks, 513-749-7000, 1-800-THE-BIG-1, pound 700 on AT&T. Phone lines loaded up because Cinca-Troit may be in our future. The city of Detroit files for Chapter 9, which is municipal bankruptcy. All right, they can't pay their bills any longer. If you're a bond holder with the city of Detroit, you're screwed. If you have a bond fund that has a bond with the city of Detroit, you're screwed. That's how it affects you. And this is just the biggest example of poorly run and mismanaged cities in America. All right, Dave, you're on 700 WLW.
Boy, Darryl keeps speaking the truth, buddy. I love it when you get on there and you get on these topics like that, because probably about 95% of the time I agree with you. It's not about agreeing with you, but what you're saying just makes common sense.
Of course it does.
I mean, and I just, other than Smitherman and Winburn, every one of those guys down there isn't, but let me ask you a question, and maybe you know the answer to this one, because everybody probably 80% of the people in the city know this streetcar is the biggest boondoggle there is. And when the thing came up for a ballot, a yes meant no and a no meant yes. Who or whom writes those ballots? I mean, the ballot should have been written simply this: do you want the streetcar or not? Yes or no?
Yeah. Well, it's always about political ease, but don't forget, Dave, there was one other caveat to that. It would also have banned the construction of any rail system in the city of Cincinnati. Remember, that was part of that deal too, so that's why it was voted down. People forget that. That people will want to say, well, yeah, people voted for the streetcar. They knew what they were voting for. Well, no, there was also another caveat to that. There was also another layer, and that was about building of rail in the city of Cincinnati. So in the event, for instance, we went back to an idea of light rail. Remember when that was a big deal?
Right.
And, in light rail, and let's say the citizens of Cincinnati or Hamilton County said, that's a good idea now. Maybe it wasn't in the early or late 1990s, I should say. But, that's a good idea now. That would have prohibited that.
But, okay, again, don't both parties usually have to agree on the wording of the ballot?
Dave, I'm going to have to go and do some research on that. Yeah, but they do, yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah. And, I mean, I can't imagine if I would have been in power, I'd have looked at that and said, what the hell? Right. No. Come on. Just put on there, do you want the streetcar now or not? Or something similar to that. Something that your average guy could understand. And then that
bring it down to the lowest common denominator.
That thing would have been voted down so fast it'd make your head spin.
Well, they those in City Hall in Cincinnati, they're hiding behind that ballot. All right, that is their mandate to have this thing be built. All right.
Exactly.
I have on this show, I have explained it pretty clearly, where you have each car, they're going to buy 5 cars, all right, for the streetcar. 5, all right? That's it. Not even 6, not even a half dozen.
And
5.
They're going to cost like $4 million.
$4.5 million each. You could go today, if we pooled our money together, we could drive up to Erie, Pennsylvania, where General Electric has a locomotive factory. I'm talking about the engine, the diesel engines.
I remember when you talked about this.
Right. Yeah. We can get a fully tricked out locomotive purchased from General Electric for $2.5 million.
But see, Darryl, you're talking talk radio here. And, I mean, yeah, WLW has a lot of people, but they don't have all the people. I mean, you get a lot of people that just don't even turn on the news that read that ballot, that looked at it. I mean, look at the average voter out there. I read that thing. I think I'm a reasonably intelligent guy. I try to keep up on what's going on politically. And I remember the wording of that thing, and I thought, what the hell are we got here? This is nuts. So there's a good one. You're great at research. You really are. And I would love for you to research.
Well, thank you.
Who writes these ballots?
Yeah, it has to be agreed upon, but I have to check that out. But yeah, let's get right down to it. Normally, it's lawyers that write it. Well, at least in their main profession, it's a lawyer.
On both sides.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dave, you have yourself a wonderful weekend. You be careful out there.
You stay cool and dry, buddy.
All right, my brother. We'll see you. 10 in front of 10 on the big one. I'm Darryl Parks. 513-749-7000 should a line become available. 700 WL. Facebook.com/Darryl Parks. Become my friend. It's approaching critical mass. Almost 5,000 friends debating, arguing, as I stir it up each day of the week. In fact, this past week, I believe at one point I put a posting on my timeline and I said something about these people never get it that I'm stirring things up on Facebook. Anyway, debating the hot issues of the day, including Cinsatrites. Could we become Cinsatrite? Become my friend at Facebook. Facebook.com/Darryl Parks. About 5 in front of 10 o'clock at 10:06 this morning. COP in OTR. This is going to end badly. I'll explain. All right, Jim. Jim, you're on the big one.
Hey, good morning. Remember that movie RoboCop?
Sure.
Isn't it just the perfect scenario for what RoboCop movie was born after? Remember?
Well, RoboCop was the privatization of the police force in Detroit. That was the premise of it. Yeah.
And the city was going to be New Detroit, and the old Detroit was just a one big giant violent war zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if Chief Craig was going to go down there and take charge of that RoboCop program.
You know, Jim, I was wondering, the first person, when I saw this story break, that they were filing for Chapter 9. Now, what ends up happening in bankruptcy, any type of contract basically becomes null and void, right?
Exactly.
That they could become renegotiated. They could become, they could not uphold the terms of the contract. My first thought was the former police chief. Because he signed a contract, wasn't it for like $225,000 or something like that?
Yeah, what is he going to work for? Food stamps or?
Well, my thought is, would you take a job with a company that had the risk of going bankrupt?
No,
of course you wouldn't.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And the funny thing about it is they have a casino downtown Detroit.
Sure.
And that's probably the only thing that's making money down there.
Well, that casino was supposed to. I remember reading about that it was going to create all kinds of jobs, and it was going to create all kinds of new restaurants and things like that. And we got sold the same thing here in Cincinnati because I can guarantee I'd be a betting man on this one. In 20 years there aren't going to be. It's not. I mean, look at the casino. Horseshoe's a nice building. It's they fixed up the whole Broadway Commons area there. It's a wonderful place and it's great. But what's the job of a casino?
To make money.
Well, no, not only that. Once they get you inside, they don't want you to leave. Right?
All right.
I mean, if you've ever gone to a casino, for instance, in Las Vegas, you can't find the exit.
There's no clocks in the wall.
There's nothing. It's like, how do we get out of here? And you're confused to get out of the place because they want to entrap you and they want you to continue to gamble at the casino. So, that's that whole thing where restaurants and shopping is going to be developed outside a casino or in a casino district. That's crap.
And in that show, Hardcore Pawn, the whole city's pawning stuff. It's just unbelievable. Well, thanks for the
all right, Jim.
matter.
Hey, Jim, have a wonderful weekend, man.
You too, sir. Bye.
That's a great show, Hardcore Pawn. Man, that just goes to show you the dregs of society that live in Detroit. They're always looking to pick a fight with the owner and his daughter, and then they have the bouncers there throwing people out of hardcore porn, or I should say hardcore pawn. All right, a minute before 10 o'clock on the big one at 10:06. COP in OTR, the good in our community. And I'm thinking this is not going to end well. This is the home of the Reds, 700 WLW.